Hello and welcome. I am Thomas Porteous and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top stories of the hour. Asian markets slide as trade war tensions between Washington and Beijing intensify. This follows a sharp drop in US stocks yesterday, erasing much of Wednesday's historic rally. Six people in Europe, Ukraine is set to receive $580 million in military aid from the United Kingdom. As fighting escalates, Russian strikes kill 2 in Ukraine, and Moscow claims to have captured another village in the Sumy region. US President Donald Trump says progress is underway on the return of Israeli hostages held in Gaza. He adds that talks are ongoing with both Israel and Hamas. Nearly 100 people have been killed since Wednesday as torrential rains batter regions of India and Nepal. India's weather office issues multi-hazard alert nationwide. US President Donald Trump is shaking up global trade again, this time with a steep tariff hike on Chinese goods. The new rate now hits 145% after a fresh 125% increase on earlier fentanyl-related duties. While most nations now face a 10% baseline tariff, Trump has paused further hikes for 90 days, a move that has offered brief relief to markets. But the pause doesn't apply to China. Key sectors like steel, autos and semiconductors are under different regimes or remain untouched. Trump says he still wants a deal with China, but his tough stance continues to rattle the markets. Stocks tumbled Thursday after sharp gains the day before. French President.
Well, it's been amazing. We had a big day yesterday. There'll always be transition difficulty, but we had in history, it was the biggest day in history, the markets. What happens with China? We would love to be able to work a deal. They've really taken advantage of our country for a long period of time. They've ripped us off beyond nobody. How people stood for it, sitting in my position, is not even believable. And we're talking about many presidents, not just a couple. But they did, and all we're doing is putting it back in shape. We're resetting the table. And I'm sure that we'll be able to get along very well. I have great respect for President Xi. He's been, in a true sense, he's been a friend of mine for a long period of time. And I think that we'll end up working out something that's very good.
Moving on now, French President Emmanuel Macron called the pause fragile and urged Europe to mobilise all levers. He says the EU must be ready with countermeasures. The European Union responded by suspending its own counter-tariffs for 90 days. Trump praised the EU's move as smart, hoping for progress at the table. But in the UK, talks are tense. Prime Minister Keir Starmer says any US trade deal must serve the UK's national interest. Trump's advisor says only an extraordinary deal will lower tariffs below 10%. Meanwhile, Trump is also threatening sanctions on Mexico over a water-sharing treaty. He accuses Mexico of shortchanging Texas farmers. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum insists they're doing what they can amid a severe drought. Meanwhile, Canada vows to retaliate with tariffs designed to hit back at the US, promising to protect Canadian jobs while inflicting, in Prime Minister Carney's words, maximum pain. Moving on once again, Asian markets took a heavy hit on Friday as trade war fears rattled investors. Japan's Nikkei plunged 5% in early trade. South Korea's Kospi also dropped nearly 2%, tracking Wall Street's deep losses. The slump follows renewed fallout from US President Donald Trump's sweeping tariffs, including a 145% rate on Chinese goods. Meanwhile, US oil prices tumbled over 5%. Gold surged to a record above $3,171 an ounce as the dollar weakened sharply. On Wall Street, stocks resumed their slide. The S&P 500 ended down 3.5%, giving back much of Wednesday's rally after Trump's 90-day tariff pause on most partners, excluding China. Dow dropped 2.5% and the NASDAQ fell over 4%. Trillions in value have now been wiped out in just days. Despite the market chaos, US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says he saw nothing unusual. But Trump admitted there's a transition cost, insisting the long-term result will be worth it. We are now joined by
transition cost and transition problems, but in the end, it's going to be a beautiful thing.
We are now joined by Akshita Thomas, Associate Producer for NewsX World, to give us the figures live. Akshita, what can you tell us about those numbers?
It's an extremely wild week for the financial markets, as Trump has put in the tariffs. Now he's planning to put up a pause on the 90-day pause on the tariffs, except on China, which will have a 125% tariff. So gold has reached an all-time high and the US dollar has significantly dropped. And if we take a look at the markets, Asian markets had a very tough time in the initial moments of trade. Let's take a look at their afternoon numbers. Nikkei had initially reached 4%, but it's now dropped to 2.91%. If we move over to Hong Kong's Hang Seng, it is now recovering slightly at a 0.94%. Moving on, if we check out Kospi, it is at a 0.49%. It has dropped at a 0.49%. ASAX is at 0.82%. And moving on, if we check Taiwan's index, it is slightly recovering with a 2.78%. India's Nifty is at a 2.12%. It is also slightly recovering. We check out Dow and Jones. If we move on to the US markets, it's dropping at a 2.5%. S&P dropping to a 3.46%. And if we check out NASDAQ, it's at a drop to a 0.43%. So as we can clearly see, the US markets are still affected by Trump's tariffs, and the Asian markets are slightly recovering, although some of them are still heavily impacted by them, but there's a slight respite in the Asian markets as compared to the US markets.
Thank you very much, Akshita. We will continue to bring you more developments as Trump's tariffs take effect. Moving on now, a newly signed agreement between the US and Panama amidst the existing tensions will now grant the US troops access to the Panama-controlled facilities. This highlights the Panamanian alignment towards the US after Panama exited the China's Belt and Road Initiative. The recent deal allows the US troops to deploy to a string of bases along the Panama Canal under a joint deal, a major concession to President Trump as he seeks to re-establish influence over the vital waterway. The agreement, signed by top security officials from both countries, allows US military personnel to deploy to Panama-controlled facilities for training, exercises and other activities. The deal stops short of allowing the United States to build its own permanent bases on the isthmus, a move that would be deeply unpopular with Panamanians and legally fraught. But it gives the United States broad sway to deploy an unspecified number of personnel to bases, some of which Washington built when it occupied the Canal Zone decades ago. Let's listen in to what the Panamanian president had to say about the same.
Lo que se firmó antes de ayer es un memorándum de entendimiento operativo, administrativo, entre dos entidades de defensa, nuestro Ministerio de Seguridad y el Ministerio o la Secretaría de Defensa de los Estados Unidos. Hasta allí. Donde por lo menos en 3 o 4 versiones que fueron devueltas, retiramos los conceptos de presencia militar permanente, de bases militares, de cesión de territorio, porque eso sí es inaceptable.
Let's now turn to New York City, where a tourist helicopter plummeted upside down into the Hudson River on Thursday, killing all 6 people on board, including a Spanish family with 3 children and the pilot, Mayor Eric Adams said. Video of the crash showed that what appeared to be a large object plunging into the river, followed by seconds of what appeared to be a helicopter blade. Afterwards, emergency and police boats were seen circling around a patch of river where the helicopter was submerged, with only what appeared to be the aircraft's landing gear poking above the water's surface. Divers helped remove the victims from the water. 4 were pronounced dead at the scene, while 2 others were taken to area hospitals, where they later succumbed to their injuries. Trump later wrote on his Truth Social platform that the footage of the accident is horrendous and added, "God bless the families and friends of the victims." The US and Russia have carried out a prisoner swap in a move signaling a push for closer ties. Moscow has released US-Russian dual citizen Kassina Karolina, who is a Los Angeles-based ballet dancer. She was sentenced to 12 years for treason after donating $50 to a pro-Ukrainian charity. In exchange, Washington freed Russian-German national Arthur Petrov, who was accused of smuggling US electronics to Russia's military. The swap took place in Abu Dhabi. Meanwhile, Russian strikes killed at least 2 people in Ukraine, with missile and drone attacks hitting Dnipro and Vladimir. President Volodymyr Zelensky condemned Moscow's actions, stating that Russia is ignoring diplomacy. Kiev intercepted 85 out of 145 drones launched overnight, while Russia claimed to have captured another village in Ukraine's Sumy region. The governor reported that 1 person was dead. Now the death toll has risen to 2 people. Let's have a closer look.
Сьогодні ввечері ворогом завдано удара по житлових багатоквартирних будинках в Житомирському районі. На жаль, 1 людина загинула, 5 людей отримали поранення, в тому числі дитина 2011 року. Знаходжусь на місці події разом з очільником ДСНС та Головного управління Національної поліції. Працює оперативно-слідча група. Наразі буде розгорнуто 2 палатки для надання допомоги громадянам, які постраждали, для забезпечення ночівлі на найближчий час. Разом з тим хочу запевнити, що всі квартири, які постраждали, будуть відновлені.
In Brussels, European defence ministers held fresh talks on securing a Ukraine ceasefire. The UK announced a new $585 million military aid package, including drones, anti-tank mines and vehicle repairs. In a surprise visit, Prince Harry travelled to Ukraine's Lviv region, meeting wounded soldiers and civilians at a rehabilitation centre. His visit, which was kept secret until he left the country, underscored the ongoing humanitarian crisis in the war-torn nation. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio confirmed that the United States and Iran will hold direct nuclear talks this Saturday in Oman. The high-stakes discussions led by US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and a senior Iranian official come amid growing tensions over Iran's nuclear ambitions. The US State Department stated that this meeting with Iran will determine whether Tehran is serious about negotiations, emphasizing that the outcome could shape future diplomatic engagements between the 2 nations. Meanwhile, Iran has also threatened to expel UN nuclear inspectors, a move that the US warns could be an escalation and miscalculation. State Department spokeswoman Tammy Bruce emphasized that removing. Here's what she said.
First of all, these actions, the threat of that kind of action, of course, is inconsistent with Iran's claims of a peaceful nuclear program, right? Also, expelling IAEA inspectors from Iran would be an escalation and a miscalculation on Iran's part. The United States remains deeply concerned that Iran is amassing a growing stockpile of highly enriched uranium for which there is no credible, peaceful purpose. Iran is the only non-nuclear weapon state producing highly enriched uranium at.
The International Atomic Agency inspectors contradict Iran's claims of a peaceful nuclear program. Despite the tensions, Rubio expressed optimism, saying that he hopes the talks will lead to peace. US President Donald Trump has warned that military action against Iran remains an option if negotiations fail. We stay in the Middle East now, where there's a new diplomatic momentum towards. Trump said that progress is being made on the release of hostages held in Gaza as negotiations continue with both Israel and Hamas. Let's take a look at what he said.
Likewise with the hostages, we're making progress. There's 59 hostages, but only 24 of them are living, and that's the way it's been presented to me by the mothers of some of the dead, mothers and fathers of some of the dead hostages, and they want the bodies of their baby as they.
Meanwhile, France is signaling a major shift in its Middle East policy. President Emmanuel Macron announced plans to recognize a Palestinian state as early as June during a United Nations conference in New York. The statement drew swift criticism from Israel, but was welcomed by Hamas, which called the move an important step towards advancing Palestinian national rights. A Hamas official highlighted France's global influence and role as a permanent member of the UN Security Council, saying it could help push for fair and lasting solutions. Moving over to the African continent now, where at least 15 civilians were killed in Sudan's Darfur region after paramilitary rapid support forces shelled a displaced persons camp. The attack comes as RSF intensifies efforts to seize El Fasher, which is the largest city in Darfur army control. The RSF also claimed to have captured Kada, a key town on the road in El Fasher. Meanwhile, Sudan accused the United Arab Emirates of supporting the RSF in carrying out genocide against the Masalit ethnic group. Sudan's acting justice minister told the International Court of Justice that the UAE-backed RSF forces were responsible for mass killings, rape, and forced displacement. The UAE rejected the allegations as baseless and politically driven. In a major victory against international drug trafficking, El Salvador has struck a significant blow, seizing a large shipment of narcotics 920 nautical miles off its coast. This morning, Attorney General Rodolfo Dialago revealed the results of the high seas operation led by the Salvadorian Navy. Let's take a listen to what he had to say. Several foreign nationals were captured during the mission, which follows a previous operation 500 miles out, intercepting 2 boats involved in drug logistics. Officials emphasize that this is part of El Salvador's ongoing crackdown on organized crime. Attorney General Delgado affirmed the country's commitment to justice, vowing a transparent and legally sound prosecution. The message is clear that El Salvador will not tolerate drug traffickers or criminal networks within its reach. We move to South America now, where Venezuela's National Assembly passed a decree proposed by President Nicolas Maduro's government declaring a state of economic emergency in response to US sanctions and tariffs. Trump earlier had begun suspending authorization for oil companies operating with Venezuela's state-owned PDVSA and imposed secondary tariffs on crude oil and gas exports. The new regulation allows Maduro to implement measures to boost economic growth, curb inflation, offer special treatment to investors, suspend taxes or exemptions, and establish import substitution mechanisms, among other actions. The emergency decree aims to aid national production. Vice President and Oil Minister Dick Lee Rodriguez said during the presentation of the document to lawmakers. The death toll after a roof collapsed at a crowded nightclub in the Dominican Republic has climbed to 218. The head of rescue operations had worked frantically since the collapse in the early hours of Tuesday to dig out survivors from the rubble of the popular Jet Set club in Santo Domingo. Among the dead were famed merengue singer Ruby Perez, who was performing on stage as the roof caved in, as well as 2 former Major League Baseball players and a local politician. More than 500 people were injured in the incident. Up to 1,000 people could have been inside the club at the time of the accident, local media has reported, though no official figure has yet to be given. Nearly 100 people have tragically lost their lives in India and Nepal since Wednesday due to heavy rainfall and severe weather conditions. In India's eastern state of Bihar, at least 64 fatalities have been reported from rain-related incidents, while over 20 people have died in the densely populated state of Uttar Pradesh. In neighbouring Nepal, lightning strikes and torrential rain have claimed at least 8 lives. The Indian Meteorological Department has issued a warning for continued heavy rainfall. Thunderstorms, lightning and gusty winds in central and eastern India, with conditions expected to persist until Saturday. This unusual weather comes ahead of the monsoon season, which typically begins in June and follows a period of intense heat waves across the region, exacerbating the already dangerous conditions. Moving on now, Tesla has officially launched in Saudi Arabia, marking a major milestone for the oil-rich kingdom and for Elon Musk. The electric vehicle giant unveiled its first showroom in Riyadh on Thursday. A Cybertruck and a newly redesigned Model Y took center stage, drawing crowds eager to test out the futuristic rides. This signals a surprising turn. Musk's once tense relationship with the kingdom appears repaired, and Saudi Arabia is doubling down on its electric dreams. Right now, electric vehicles make up just 1% of cars on Saudi roads, but Riyadh wants that number to jump to 30% in just 5 years. It's a bold target for a nation where long highways still lack a single charging point. Tesla, meanwhile, is looking for fresh markets. Global sales plunged 13% last quarter, the worst drop in nearly 3 years, with a backlash over Musk's role in Donald Trump's campaign. Rising competition and an aging lineup all taking a toll. The launch event comes just as Trump prepares to visit Saudi Arabia, his first foreign trip since re-entering the political spotlight. Tesla executives say they plan to open pop-up stores, launch online sales and build superchargers across key Saudi cities. Musk himself didn't attend the launch, either in person or virtually. But for many in the crowd, seeing Tesla in Riyadh was enough. One guest called it a historic event.
كانت تمثل طفولتنا لأنه إحنا أول ما بدأنا في الطفولة كانت بالنهاية السيارات بالنسبة لنا عبارة عن أشياء كهربائية. فحالياً this is dream come reality. As we see يعني حالياً عندنا هذه السيارات متواجدة وإن شاء الله أكون من الناس اللي أقدر أقتنيها يوم من الأيام.
والله الأمانة هذا حدث يعني تاريخي بالنسبة لي. أنا سبق وكنت في زيارة لأمريكا وكنت دائما أجرب سيارات تسلا وكنت أحلم الحقيقة أشوف تسلا في الرياض. فالحمد لله يعني حدث تاريخي ومشاعر ما أقدر أوصفها الحقيقة.
Italian luxury fashion house Prada has reached a deal with US group Capri Holdings to buy rival fashion house Versace for $1.38 billion. This acquisition comes after Donatella Versace stepped down from her role as the creative director at Versace this March. Prada's chairman and executive director, Patrizio Bardelli, said, "We are delighted to welcome Versace to the Prada Group and to build a new chapter for the brand with which we share a strong commitment to creativity, craftsmanship and heritage." The negotiations to buy Versace between Prada and Capri had begun in February. Well, that's all we have time for. We will continue to bring you more news updates from around the world.